Welcome to another edition of Between Two Nuts. Today I am speaking with the lovely and most fabulous of all YouTube, or the prettiest YouTuber ever, is Second Street Marvel. And we're just going to be sitting down and having a bit of a conversation, chat, if you will. Thank you so much for sitting with me today and hanging out, Second Street.
Thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it. I've been catching some of these episodes you've done, and quite enjoyed them. Quite enjoyed them.
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, I try to get them up. I at least try to get up two a week. Some weeks I get. It seems like everyone's available in the same week. So I have those moments where I'm like, oh my god. But go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about your channel. Those who may not have heard of you, or maybe they have. But either way, just go ahead and give a plug.
My name is Trinity. I run my channel, The Second Street Marvel. It's kind of weird how, I think a lot of us go through the same thing. I started off my channel as one thing and it kind of turns into something else along the way. It becomes a beast of its own. And I started off, just wanting to do like, theories in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because I just really got into YouTube about the same time that I started my channel. Really, not too much sooner. I was wanting to put theories out there, my own theories, because I was watching all these videos, these clickbait videos with
Mm-hmm.
all these plot leaks, and let me put that in quotes, plot leaks. And I was like, well, man, a lot of these things, a lot of these, plot leaks and these theories aren't that good because you see this stuff in other movies that pretty much debunks these things. So I wanted to come up and start doing my own theories, and then it all just kind of took a life of its own. I was at the same time I was getting into reading comic books again, and yeah, then after that, I started doing live streams talking about comic books and, some of those things. And then that's when my live streams at Trailer Park Live just kind of came out of nowhere. I just started talking about just other things. And at some point, I don't know how, people started showing up.
It usually starts that way. I think it's when the way that you come across on your videos is pretty genuine, and you're not talking from a place of just simply, oh, I'm trying to pull in a crowd based on some kind of hot take or whatever. Saying that with
Right.
love. Most of your content comes from a direction of I know, you know your comic books, the films that you're interested in. These are actual things that you are interested in. It's not just so much you're trying to reach into a certain group or fandom just to pull people. It's more genuineness that I think most people, at least that's my first impression, is you come across very genuine, and you say what's on your mind, and you keep it very, I would say you have a centralized view. You do look at both sides, but at the same time, you have your own points and opinions, and I think that's very valuable.
Yeah, definitely. Especially these days with so many people. I mean, just trying to, it seems like there's a lot of people out there that just kind of it's not even fake it to make it. It's just like they're just faking it altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And just like you said, I think you can really sense that out of somebody's delivery. Whether they're on camera or not, you can just kind of hear it in their voice. And at least I can.
Yeah.
I think throughout my life I've become attuned to just reading people,
Yeah.
and that's something when I started my channel that I realized that I wanted to do. Because at first, my first couple of videos, I didn't do any on camera stuff, and then I was like, you know what? But I want to be on camera because when I watch videos, I like seeing people. Like I feel more in touch with them. I feel more
Mm-hmm.
in tune. I
Mm-hmm.
want to hear what they have to say, and plus, sometimes you get a just see things through their I don't know, micro expressions or whatnot, or even just, bodily, just body talk, I guess, that really comes through the screen for me. And that's really kind of what I gravitated more towards. And and, plus, I mean, like I said, it helps me see that somebody else is being genuine. And that's
Yeah.
something I always wanted to be too, is be genuine myself. I mean, I have no reason to lie about anything or fake about anything. I just be who I am.
Yeah. And I think when it was the debate of like for my own channel of being on camera or not, and in my case, the reason why I chose not to be on camera was primarily because there has a tendency, especially among women, the need to flash their boobies, and I say that with love, and that. And when you're on a panel of other females and you're a female and you're not doing that behavior, you are still getting the flack of the people who are there to see the boobies, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
my DMs will blow up with inappropriateness. Oh my! And I was like, oh wow, and that's not even being on the camera. So I was like, you know what? I used to RPG online, like I did, like gaming and stuff. And for years, I gamed with people that didn't know I was female for years until I got on a voice chat, and then it came
Right.
out, and I was like, oh my, now I have to, and they were totally fine with it. But they're like, I had no idea. I said, that's the point. It's if I have a point to get across, eventually I'll go on camera. But I need to get past that. And vanity is vanity, and that's how I look at it to some extent because that's the direction. There's very few. There's a handful of ladies out there who really do the job well. They hold themselves in the proper manner, meaning they don't hypersexualize themselves, and that can take away a lot from what you're saying. And it turns off a lot
Right.
of people, and I personally don't like it myself because I like to hear what someone has to say. And if nothing that they're saying is doing any good, and the only thing that people are there for is like going to Twitch, let's put it that way, and they're just there to
Right.
watch somebody, if you know what I mean. And as
Yeah.
opposed to getting something valuable, I have to start it from a different perspective and then move over to the obvious, meaning eventually camera, yes, I'll go on camera. But it's one of those things where you have to position. Whereas other channels, people are more than happy to be on camera. A lot of are male. And it's because there's a lot of weirdness with being a female online. And
Right.
it's like my little one. She wants to be on YouTube. I'm like, no, you're not there yet. I need to walk you through this. You know what I mean? It's not just, hey, I'm going to go and show myself on camera. There's a lot of things to be concerned about, especially with young children and, or younger, anybody who's a minor, let's put it that way, on any social media platform, whether that's on Twitch or YouTube. But as far as genuineness goes, I agree. I think that, you can learn a lot more from people when you meet them. That's one. And two, when you see them face to face. And genuineness comes across in, I think, so many different ways. A lot of it, I've listened to a lot of different people's opinions, but I don't like nitpicking things on, let's say, material such as the Star Wars trailer that just, well, whatever the hell they want to call it, teaser, they dropped today,
Yeah.
or the Mandalorian. Like I enjoyed the Mandalorian, right? And
Hmm.
there's a lot of people that don't, because it's anti-Disney or they really didn't like it, but they're picking at very fine details that, in my opinion, don't matter right now.
Right.
So it ruins the whole concept of what is an objective review or an objective point of view. When you have something that's narrowed into a certain facet, it can ruin that review or that opinion. I knew people that were into specific comic books, but because it was a different artist, even though they did really well, but because they associated with what they didn't like politically, they hated that book. They hated all of it. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like it's still a good comic book. You can still appreciate that was well done, and there isn't anything in there that's overly SJW or I say virtue signaling, whatever you want to call it, but actually appreciating it. And
Right.
you know what I mean? So I don't know. That's one thing though I've noticed is just the genuineness goes out the window when it's clickbaits, and that's including sometimes reviews. That's including opinions, and you're not really getting a genuine opinion. Um, what is when you first started making? You said in the beginning it started with, oh well, I'm just going to talk about a little bit about this and that and things that you are interested in. But where do you see? This is a big question, and it's a long answer, I'm sure. But what is your goal for your channel as it goes forward? Because I know that you have a genuineness to you, and you are looking things objectively. You're not just kind of running into things and saying, "Oh, I pick a side here," and or I'm going to be part of a collective movement, and that's it. I'm going to have my own opinion. But where do you see your channel going, and what is your goal, I guess, moving forward? What would you like to see it do?
And that is a great question, and that is definitely a long answer. And
Yeah.
um, honestly, I don't really know. I just kind of I, when I started this thing, the first thing most people think about is like, oh, I want to build a channel. I want to get to 1,000 subscribers and get my watch hours and become monetized and all this stuff and make money on YouTube.
Mhm. Mhm.
And maybe hope along the way, maybe you make that viral video that everybody likes and, you get all kinds of paid from. Well, and then, after starting, I realized, what, I'm just having fun making content anyway. And I really ultimately, I think at this point, like I've got my own business and I like doing that, and I would never quit doing that. I mean, unless there was just a better job opportunity that came along, but I would never do this full time. And just because, I mean, this
Mhm.
being on YouTube, even just as much as I have been, it kind of gets a little bit tiring. And
Mm.
it itself is a job, realistically. And I think that's kind of what I wanted to start doing here on my channel is I just want to build an audience of people who want to hear not necessarily what I have to say, but watch comic book reviews, and talk about movies, have conversations about movies,
Mhm.
just kind of the nerdy things that I'm into. Like, one of the things I haven't talked about enough on my channel is music. Like, I absolutely love music, and I'm a metalhead, but I grew up in, like, through the 80s and 90s.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
I love, like, rap and hip hop as well.
Right.
And and really I like, just I would say, all kinds of music. I hate the whole thing, like, well, I like any kind of music. But when it comes down to it, I really, for the most part, as long as it's good, I
Right.
do like it. And I think that kind of goes into anything. And I guess that's kind of what I wanted to start focusing on my channel more, was just like being myself and
Mhm.
sharing what I love. And the biggest thing to me is sharing what I love with other people in the hopes that they will get into it, or at least enjoy what I have to say about it, and maybe help form their opinions. Maybe change their mind on something, or see somebody else's point of view. Just those different kinds of things, and just interacting with other people, because that's ultimately what I want. And it's really hard to say. Like, I know that at some point I'm always going to have a limited audience, because I mean, realistically, at some point, somebody's going to hear it and be like, I don't agree with this guy. F this guy.
Right.
I don't want to follow this guy. And maybe you get a hater and they come watch all your videos and they dislike all your videos. But I think for me, I think there's still something to be learned from that person, and I
Mhm.
want them to be here. I want them to be around. I want to hear what they have to say. Because for me, one of the biggest things is, and I don't really ever talk about a whole lot of this stuff except for, like, when I'm with my mother,
Mhm.
is just like these deep philosophical kind of things. Because one thing I've talked about several times here on my channel is, like, the way I look at it is, I myself as a person am a collection of all the other people that I've ever interacted with, that
Mhm.
I've ever talked with, and things like that. And I think for me, that's what it ultimately is more just getting in contact with people, and letting them see, like, hey, I'm here, like, I'm just a normal dude. And I think that's something, I think that's why I started going in the direction I've gone with some of my content too, is because I think too many times we see people out there being too polarized, being one way or the other.
Mhm.
And it's just faked for online, for maybe clicks or views or anything like that as well. And we don't see as much, I mean, there's still plenty of people out there being genuine, but we see so many more people faking it out there
Yeah.
nowadays,
Yes.
as opposed to just being genuine. And that's my kind of thing, is like, with all these fandoms and how they've gotten nowadays. It's just weird to me. Like, I like people's political leanings, whether their beliefs and stuff, have gone on to affect how they feel about movies,
Yeah.
about books, about comic books, and all these things. And while it's just so, like, people are so focused on that, and people act like it's something that's new. And
Yeah.
for me, I'm like,
Yep.
these are the arts. We're talking about comics. We're talking about books. We're talking about music. We're talking about movies. These are artistic things, artistic expressions. The mediums that people express themselves on. And so for anybody to say, like, oh, like, we see all this SJW stuff in the movies nowadays, like, it's always been that way.
Mhm.
It's just what's happened now is people are being lazy about it, and not just trying to write something good. They're trying to
Mhm.
actually, not even virtue signaling. They're just trying to put their messages out there, in a way that's just so lazily done.
Yep. Yep.
And I think that's one of the things I like to do on my channel, is I like to kind of, I mean, I myself, like you're saying, I try to be as objective as possible when hearing things. I like to keep my mind open, to being changed, and hearing somebody else's perspective. And I think that's what I want to kind of do, with a lot of my content, is break down those barriers. Like, you can see, like, a lot of well, not all the time. I mean, sometimes I act a little irrationally, but
Well,
um I want people to see that I'm just human, and I
right.
have feelings, and I feel a certain way about things, but I'm also totally willing to hear anybody else out.
Mhm.
I have no problem with hearing somebody else's point of view, even if it is contrary to mine. I'm sure there'll be some subjects that I don't feel that way so much about, but that's really only two things that I can think of.
Right.
And and that's ultimately what I've decided that, like kind of where I want to go is like seeing, I want to be at least a sane voice out there in any of these kinds of fandoms of the things that I'm into, and be like, see, like we're not all a-holes,
Yeah.
we can be normal, we can interact, and and that's why like I want people, on my channel when they come there to feel welcome, because I ultimately want them there, especially if they have opposing views. And that's the thing for me, like if they have opposing views, I want to hear from you even more.
Mhm.
More so than people who agree with me, and not only for the mere fact of, not getting into an echo chamber or anything, but just for the mere fact of you feel differently than I do. And I want to know why. What is it
Right.
about your perspective? What is it about your background, or what happened to you? Maybe different from me, or your experiences different from mine. And I want to, just like I don't know, like I said, I'm like a people watcher. I like observing people and things like that.
Mhm.
And I think that's where, kind of I've taken some of my content in that same direction as well. And then even wanting to, try to be at least somewhat positive, even when I have a negative take on things, because
Yeah.
there's so much negativity out there in the world. I mean, we just don't need any more of it. And I'm negative enough in my personal life, when I'm not being on camera, that I don't feel that there's any need whatsoever for there to be another voice out there doing the same thing.
Well,
We
it
need more
starts to
positive
eat
voices.
you up. You know what I mean? Like that kind of negativity starts to eat you up a little bit, and you have to have a place like, I like for me, it's like what is it? I have to have a good vent. Once that's over, then I'm done with it. It's kind of like I put it in the trash can. I'm like, okay, I've had my take on it. Now I'm done. But I can't keep going down that road. You know what I mean? Repeating and
Yes.
regurgitating it because it's just going to eat you up. It's kind of like a plague, really. So,
Right.
it's one of those things that you see happen quite frequently on different media platforms. Just look at Facebook. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Um, I don't go there anymore, and I use Messenger to stay in touch with family, but I don't interact on it because it got to that point where, especially post election, it was a nightmare, and it just got worse, and it's still kind of in that arena right now. And it's just people are so angry and so upset all the time, and it's so easy to be angry, but it's not
Right.
it's not as which is sad, but it's not as easy to be positive. Sometimes, things can eat you up a bit, and it's okay to let it go, but come back and say, okay, well, this is the direction I want to go in. This is, it's out of the system now. Now I can move forward, you know,
Right.
and we can keep a conversation going on different stuff and elaborating on things in our lives that brought us to where we want to be. Um,
Right.
I wanted to ask a question, taking a step back, because you said, the music thing.
Hmm.
If I were to go, and let's just pretend, if I were to look at your playlist right now in your car or vehicle or whatever, your playlist that you play in the car, minus maybe small marvels, maybe, I don't know, depends. Some kids are sensitive to sound. Um, but what would be on your playlist that you would be playing in your car?
On my playlist for the most part in my car, would probably be things like probably like Limp Bizkit, Cottonmouth Kings,
Mm.
a lot of like '90s rap, like NWA, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, a lot of that kind of stuff, and then things like Motley Crue. I grew up when I was growing up. Motley Crue was one of my favorite bands in the world. Um, and then yeah, mostly a lot of rock music, like rock and heavy metal for the most part. And even some of them that kind of, and that's where I say I kind of grew up in that age where things were different. Like I was into all these different types of music. So you'll find like the Limp Biscuits in
Right.
there, and things like that, which I'm not totally into all the new metal neither. Cause like
Mm-hmm.
Linkin Park is one of those bands out there. Like everybody loves Linkin Park. And me, I'm like, I was never really a big fan of them.
Yeah.
And it's not they're terrible. I just not as into them as I am like a Limp Bizkit or a Corn or a Deftones.
Right.
But yeah, for the most part, I would say you'd probably get a lot of that, like Limp Bizkit, Cottonmouth Kings, Pantera.
Mm. Yeah, like Calm Squirrel is a huge metal fan, so yes, he's in the same he's in the same boat as you. He was a very big Pantera fan, and they used to go behind, what do you call it, backstage at the concerts to meet a lot of these guys, and when they were young. And he has so many wonderful memories, and people have passed away obviously since then. Different musicians within the bands and so on, but
Yeah.
it was a big part of his childhood. It was like a very big chunk of it for him was going out and getting that new release, whatever it was, a single or a CD,
Yeah.
whether this was pre or post adult disclaimers placed on them is another story. Remember when they
Hmm.
had the explicit material and you had to be a certain age to buy them? Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
that's a big part of like that growing up is music. And I think that's a great genre. I think it's one of those things that reaches out to people, especially you never know. I mean, there's a lot of metal fans, there's a lot of rap fans, especially during that East Coast, West Coast rap, the battling of I guess, the rap groups and
Yeah.
the coasts. And that was a great time because we got some ridiculous music, which was absolutely fantastic. Um,
Oh yeah.
I loved it. I've been like going back to stuff I when I was very young. A lot of the
Hmm.
local DJs and stuff like that would spin all night long live, and sometimes these groups, like the East Coast, especially East Coast rappers, would come in and perform at these clubs, and it would be over the radio. So you would have a live feed out of the clubs all night on the hip hop stations and so on, and
Yeah.
it was all about bass, back then, and still is
Hmm.
for me. But but
Right.
it's one of those things though that like going back and all of a sudden these suggestions are coming up on my Spotify lists and stuff because that's where I've been collecting them and then looking for the albums and so on. And it's that little nice throwback. It's a big piece of our childhood in a very different kind of way. Music was a big thing. I don't know. Did you feel like that was the same case for you growing up? Was music?
Definitely. Definitely it was huge. And I was kind of influenced by a lot of people. Like I got into mostly the rock and everything by way of my uncle who lived, my grandma, my grandparents, they lived next door to us when I was
Mm.
growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my uncles, he was, I don't know, he was a good 5, 6 years older than us easily. Probably more than that, probably a good 10 years, I guess. But he was still old enough, like to where like he would hang out with us, and he,
Mm-hmm.
he was influential. And then my cousin as well. When I'd go stay at his house, he had older brothers as well, and a lot of them were really into like rock and metal music back then. And then another huge influence was my mom. My
Mm.
my mother and father, they listened to music, but my father, we didn't really listen to music with him so much. It'd be like Saturday morning, it's time to clean the house. Mom would start throwing our shit all over the house, in big piles, and saying
Right.
clean all this stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
And during all that, we would be listening to music. She would put on. She used to teach aerobics as well.
Oh.
My mother did. So we got a lot of like just different types of music. Like we'd get like 80s hits and things like that were good for them to do like aerobic exercise,
Yeah.
and then a whole bunch of like even things from like this like the 60s, the
Mm-hmm.
70s. And so I really did like a lot of that kind of music too. Like like well, I guess more from my grandma would have been like some of the Elvis Presley's and Buddy Holly and stuff like that. But I mean, even growing up, we listened to that. Like on Saturday nights, my parents would go play cards at their friend's house, and they would play the oldies station. So I love oldies.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was other things too, like I said, throughout the 70s and stuff that we'd listen to, like the Fleetwood Mac and
Yep.
Hall and Oates. I absolutely love Hall and Oates. I've been tripping on them, for over for the past year, just at their musical catalog, because like I didn't realize how big they were and how
Yep.
long they had been doing music. I think their first album, like their first studio album, was like 72. And I was like, holy crap, I didn't realize they've been around that long. And
Right.
I go back and listen to their catalog of music, and I'm like, this music just does, I mean, it stands the test of time, even all the way through their stuff through the 80s and everything. Like, man, like these guys are true artists, and their range of musical talents, just like the type of music they do, is just it's crazy.
So, did your mom
And
have
it's
a did your mom have a vinyl? Was it on vinyl or was this all on like, different tapes, I guess, and cassettes or 8 tracks or what?
we had some vinyl. I know we had some 8 tracks as well, but mostly it would have been cassette tapes.
Mhm. I just ask. It's always interesting cuz like some parents are my mom was big into vinyl and then she got big into cassettes. Like it was like a and when CDs came out that was over, but I remember like she was big into the same type of thing. Like I got introduced to the Beach Boys against my will, and then the Beatles and all that. And I was not a fan of the Beatles. I could dig the Beach Boys. I was down with that, but the Beatles just wasn't my thing. I appreciate it, but I get it. Whatever. But the 70s were a big thing. So she had like Chicago and Boston and
Yeah.
Journey,
Yeah.
you know, and she would play that a
Yeah.
lot. And I remember looking at her album. She loved Genesis too. And
Oh yeah, man. Genesis.
so she had all
Man,
the, and when they came down to where we lived, because we lived in Miami at the time, so we got all the big bands that would come through. So we'd get like Genesis came on their Invisible Touch tour, and
oh yeah.
she was a huge fan of Phil Collins. Like she had a problem. I think she needed intervention, but she was like really she loved him so much, and so she got to go to a Seriously tour and everything else that came through. So, and also Bruce Springsteen when he came through on Born in the USA tour thing he did, and
Oh yeah.
I mean she went to a lot of concerts like that, and Sting that was another one, and the Police,
Hmm.
and all those types of music it did influence definitely like tastes, but like the rock is what I really loved, and I got into dance and dance music and rock. My grandparents, another story. I don't know. So your grandma was into like the 50s, 60s a bit, like maybe Buddy Holly, Elvis Presley,
Yeah.
that kind of genre, I guess. Um, did
Yeah.
they
Definitely.
now were they? This is a very bizarre but interesting question because I always ask. Now, was Grandma a dancer? Did she go out dancing or anything, or was she just one of those I love to listen to music types?
As far as I know, she was just one of those love to listen to music types.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as far as I know, I mean, God, I think she got pregnant with my father when she was 15, had him when she was 16,
Oh
and
wow.
people
Okay.
around on that these days, you know what I mean? But that
Mm-hmm.
was a regular occurrence,
Yeah.
back then,
Yep.
as far back as just 100 years ago. Society's crippled children these days for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't think. I mean, as far as I know of, they wasn't really into the dance scene or anything. But I
Mm-hmm.
could be completely wrong. I guess I've never really had those kind of conversations with her. But my grandma, she's got some sass to her, so I couldn't imagine that she didn't ever go
You know,
out.
it'd be
That
a
they
good
didn't ever go
it'd
out
be
or
a
anything.
good conversation to have. How old is your grandma now?
Gosh, honestly, I don't know. She's definitely in her 80s.
Okay.
I think she just turned 80, as a matter of fact,
Oh.
last year. So should be 81 now.
Okay. I definitely suggest asking grandma about her younger days, like like as far as dancing, because that was such a big deal. Like I had the conversation because it was dancing was a big part of my family because they're all like, oh God bless. My grandparents were into polka, and I had
Oh,
absolutely no choice as a young person, and so I'd be drug, right? Wherever that was, American Legions or bingo halls, or and they dragged me, and I met like a lot of those polka people, I guess, and they were all very nice, but I had no interest in polka whatsoever. Um, but but that was a huge part of there. My grandmother, she was unable to, as she got older, she was having issues with her knees and so on, so she wasn't able to dance as much. But my grandfather, up until he developed severe Alzheimer's, he was still dancing, and he was a very good dancer. And dancing was such a big part of like the social scene of younger people. Even though it was a different generation, it bled into the 60s and 70s. The dance scene, it was still, such a thing. And it'd be interesting to see what your grandma would say about, what she used to do when she was younger. Did she go dancing, and what type of music did she dance to, and all that kind of stuff? Because um, it's their youth. I mean, I think dancing and music in general, it brings out youth in people. It can bring out the positivity in people too, memories, because there's always good or bad memories attached. Doesn't matter. It's reflective of where they come from and where they're at. And grandparents are such a great. I've talked with many people about grandparents, but grandparents are a great treasure, in my opinion,
yeah.
and they offer a lot of insight, even if it's like tough love a little bit in the tone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, that would be something definitely to have some conversations with her about because I've thought about wanting to do that anyway, is like go like set up my camera, you
Mm-hmm.
just like actually get some footage of it and record it, just having a conversation with my grandma just about things like that. Yeah, I mean that's a perfect one, like about music and dancing, just about family life and things like that, just things that I never really knew about. And But some of it too, I kind of wanted to get into some deeper conversations with my grandmother as well,
Right.
like some hard conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean she's still alive. My grandpa, he passed away, back in the 90s, probably like
Mm.
97, 98.
Oh wow.
He passed away. He died. He had cancer.
Oh.
My father died in 2002.
Ooh.
Um, and then my one of my uncles, one of her other sons, he committed suicide.
Oh.
And then just here, a handful of years ago, even lost one of my other uncles, and God, I think his may have been due to cancer as well.
Oh.
And
And that's a lot for her, to sit
yeah,
back and watch. And a great conversation, like one of the things, my grandmother was very open, so it's like she told me stuff I didn't at the time. I was like, "What?" I'm like, "Grandma." But
yeah.
it made sense later, but she really shared a lot about aging
Hmm.
and getting older, and I got to see a lot of it too, but I understood it. I was a full-time caregiver for them. Well, my mom helped a bit too, but when my grandmother was more later in life, I took over. And
Hmm.
she was very much like open about aging, and I got to see those experiences of what it was like, meaning seeing her friends pass away that she'd known since childhood, or since she was a nurse, or since the war, because they went to World War II. So she had all these memories of all these different people, and I had met them when I was, later in life. You think everyone's older when you're young, you're like, oh,
Right.
they're old. Um, but really, they had all these long memories. So it'd be interesting immensely to ask her questions about as she's gotten older, like things that she is, the hardships, especially losing people is the hardest one, especially children, you know.
Right.
Um, I'm sorry to hear about your dad and your, different family members that have, just it was stuff that happens, and it's unfortunate, and there's really no words to describe that kind of loss, but she would be a very interesting person to ask about, because mothers, especially older mothers, they process things very differently, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean. There's a bit of wisdom there with time, and there's also a lot of grief that's in part that never really goes away. I've talked to different older folks, and they've always said losing a child is very. It's something that's without words. It's very different, and
Yeah.
you find ways though to live vicariously through your grandchildren after you've lost a child. Let's say your son or daughter, their children are the ones that you kind of look at and go, well, here they are. These are the continuances, and these are the legacies of this person, and they may not be here with us for whatever reason, but this is a gift, and that's kind of what they told me. They're like, I look forward to seeing my grandkids, and knowing they're doing well, and being able to be that extra mom, or extra grandpa, whatever you want to call it, the extra parent. And really, that's the role that grandparents are. It's like it's having that extra wisdom. But yeah, what a gift to have her. It really is. No matter how
Yeah.
feisty they get.
Yeah. Yeah. And believe me, my grandma can be. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. And like I said, I've always wanted to. I think it's just been recently I've really wanted to have those kind of conversations with her. And I know, like, I guess I've never really talked to my grandma about that kind of stuff before.
Hmm.
And so at the same time, kind of makes it a difficult conversation. But sometimes it makes me wonder, like, maybe at some point they're just waiting for somebody to
Yes.
ask and actually talk about those kinds of things at the same time. Because, if somebody don't ask, you're probably not sharing those feelings and those thoughts that you have,
And
and therefore,
yeah.
it in itself kind of probably festers up inside,
Well, right.
and
Hmm.
probably just waiting for us the right time to get it out there and release it.
And also, too, I mean, this is not to discredit anyone who's older by any means, but um, when I worked in nursing facilities, a lot of families barely, this is bad. I don't like nursing facilities at all. I mean, I do believe that they have a meaning and a purpose, but it's usually for more extreme cases, like if someone's, has really severe Alzheimer's and they need 24/7 care, that kind of thing, or ALS, or
Right.
something very severe with the dementia category or whatever. Um, but they're not at home with their families like they used to be. That's kind of that cultural break that we have going on, where it's good that people are bringing, elder generations into their homes and having multi-generational homes. Even if they're next door, it counts, because
Right.
it's that connection, and it's so important to have that. But when I was in the facility, helping out and also seeing my grandma, who was raising absolute hell, um, the older folks there, it was a lot of they don't believe that, people cared. And that seemed to be
Right.
that feeling was that they don't think that anyone cares about their stories or their pieces of wisdom. And like my grandma repeated this, and it's because that's the impact they had on me growing up. Big time was she said, don't learn from my successes, learn from my failures, you know, and grow from that. Learn and understand, like, okay, like I'm not a perfect human being. My grandmother certainly wasn't, but at the same time, she was a strong-willed type personality that was like, listen, this is my advice here and this is my wisdom there. I'm like, oh my God. And then like later on, now that I'm older and I have, now I have a daughter, I'm understanding those things that she told me from a very young age, right? About, being safe and, common sense stuff. With girls and boys, you tell boys the same things to an extent you do girls, but girls, we hear a different side to things because of, the world isn't safe, blah, 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 predators, blah, blah, blah. And being smart
Yeah.
about things because, um, like my eldest son now, he has seen stuff, like around me that he's like, whoa, like because my grandma told him the same stuff, and he's like, I just never, now it makes sense. When I was young, I was like, oh, she's kind of going on a rattling. I'm like, but it all came full circle, and now he sees it. And I think all they're waiting for is to be asked. I honestly believe that, even if they're a little stubborn and they say that I don't have anything to offer. There's always a story. There's always some piece of wisdom, even if they're telling you to, to f off. In the end,
Right.
there's something there that they're willing to. And then, I've had older, there's a couple older gentlemen. I did hospice for a while too, and they were stubborn. And one of them, he was just, I don't know how to say it nicely. Um, Probably related to the devil on some level on some days. And he would just get really feisty with me. And I would just ignore him because that's, he's going to do what he's going to do. And I'm not going to change it by fighting with him. And then once he realized I wasn't going to feed and do the thing that most of the nurses would do or other people, he calmed down and he and I got along just fine. But he would share little anecdotes and stories, and he would say the point of that was, and he'd tell me the point. He's like, now I see it. The time, had no idea. And it was funny because they were just stories. But that's like the moral lessons of storytelling that we get from our elders. And yeah, what a gift to have her. And I absolutely think that's an outstanding idea, is to sit down with grandma and have that conversation, especially for the kids, something they can go back to. And thank God for technology.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely.
So, here's the other thing too. How what is something when you look at your kids and you look at how far you've come to where you are now? I mean, as an adult, what are the stories that you share with them that you believe are like one story? Let's start with that. What is one story that you always kind of repeat as an example story? Like meaning, this has happened to me. You need to be wary about this, or maybe this is something you should consider because this is what I did and it helped me or it hurt me or whatever. Kind of like the lesson story. There's always one lesson story that we have that indirectly we tell the kids. They may not get it right away, but as they get older, it's that one that will become. Remember, you used to tell me that story that one time about when you were young and you did this and you said it was a bad idea. What is your lesson story that you share with the kids?
I think for me, I don't know that I really give them stories about things that have happened to me other than things that I want out of them, the kind of
Mm-hmm.
their expectation going through life. And that's, for one, just be good human beings.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say that you have to like everybody, that you're going to get along with everybody, but also set a good example for others to follow, because and I always tell them, set a good example for the other kids that are there in school with you,
Right.
because they may not have the luxuries and be as privileged as you have been. They may have mothers and fathers who work full-time jobs and work all kinds of hours, and they rarely ever get to see them. Maybe they go to babysitting and do these different things. Maybe they're just largely ignored by their parents.
Right.
Maybe they just don't have these good examples and things to follow. And be that good example for them. And when if you see kids out there being picked on and being bullied and those kinds of things, step up and say something, even if it's one of your friends doing the picking and and the being the butthead. You know what I mean? Just
Mm-hmm.
um, don't be afraid to don't be too cool. you
Right.
know
Mm-hmm.
just be real human beings, and just think about how, how you would feel if you were in whatever other person's situation, especially at their age, because most of the kids, whether they've been through bad things or not, they've they need those good examples, and they don't know any better,
Mhm.
a lot of times. So just and I think largely it's that, because I've always kind of told my kids, like, you don't have to be the smartest kid in school. You don't have to be the best at anything, except for just be a good example for others to follow,
Right.
and not being afraid to speak your mind. And I think that's one of the things, I guess, I've kind of told them a lot about
Mhm.
is, you know, being honest and always being truthful. And not that I was always completely 100% honest and always truthful. Not
Right.
that I never lied about anything, but being honest is, I mean, honesty is the best policy.
Yep.
And I've found that it has always served me well in life, even in situations where um,
Yeah.
maybe I should hold back, and not say something, because a lot of times nobody ever wants to say the hard thing. Nobody ever wants to point the finger and say, "Look, this is the problem. I know I'm part of the problem, but
Mhm.
nobody else is saying anything, and I feel like I'm going bonkers here because I want to say this, but nobody else is willing to say it, and I feel like everybody else wants to say it, but nobody around here has the balls to say it, and I'm just going to
Yeah.
say it."
And then there's
And
that moment when you do say it, and sometimes it lands, meaning it works, and everyone's like, "Oh, I'm so glad you said something." And then there's the other times where you're still the one standing there going, "Well, okay, well, this mountain, I already planned this mountain to be alone. I'm standing right here. You guys know where I'm at. I'll be
yeah,
alone, but at least it's out there."
yeah, and I've always kind of, I think that's one of the things throughout my life. I've always been willing to be that person to say, if it's the unpopular thing, or just honestly just being myself. And even if that's making an ass out of myself, I'm willing to make an ass out of myself to say what's on my mind, even if I might be wrong, because
Right.
I'm totally open to the notion that I could be wrong about something. And I think that's something a whole lot of people don't want to be, is wrong about something, or at least
Yeah.
owning up to it or admitting it. And but I mean, because it's a learning lesson, for me
Yeah.
ultimately. If I'm wrong about something, if I feel like an ass later, I've learned something from that.
Right.
And that's ultimately, I mean, to me, that's one of the most important things in our lives,
Mhm.
is we can't ever stop learning. And even if that's from our own mistakes, I mean, do your best to learn from somebody else's mistakes, but
Absolutely.
be willing to learn from your own, and be willing to own up to them as well.
Yeah, I think that is an interesting point. There is the accountability. Is that we have. I've met a lot of people that have come from families where there's no accountability. Meaning, if something bad happened, it was not discussed. It was just ignored. And as they got older and they have their own children, accountability becomes a very big thing. Meaning, owning up to a mistake and just saying, "Okay, I made a mistake. I apologize. I didn't mean it to. I didn't. My intention was not for it to happen this way, but it did. So I'm sorry. Blah blah blah." Just a simple, genuine apology is almost. It's become rarer and rarer.
Right.
And it's scary because this is a society that we're trying to raise kids, small marvels and small squirrels in. And it gets a little complicated sometimes because when someone's not taking accountability for, let's say, they've done some harm. This is that life lesson. Everything you said are life lessons. Those are those little, even a lesson. Sometimes it's obviously it's more than just a story, but it's something we repeat and it sticks with them, hopefully, and you can only hope it does as they get older. But it's when a kid at school does something bad to them, and it's a friend, or they thought they were a friend, and they come home and there's that first heartbreak, that first friendship,
Right.
that fell apart a bit, and having that conversation about, well, they don't want to apologize, but I don't understand what I did wrong, so I tried to apologize to them, but they don't want to talk to me. And it's that kind of thing, and I'm like, listen, sometimes everyone's built differently. you know Everyone has different backgrounds, and they may not understand why they're upset right now. Maybe they need time to think about things. And also, too, just keep your distance and don't force yourself. Don't force yourself on them. Let them have space and let them come to a point where they're willing to talk. I said, otherwise, it isn't about who's right and wrong right now. You guys haven't even spoken. Yeah, there was no conversation to be had. you know
Yeah.
and it's hard to explain that to little ones though when they're first figuring out that first heartbreak, and the first time someone hurts their feelings or bullies them in some cases, and it's working through those things with kids, and the accountability has become such a problem even among adults. It's rough. So it's like when kids don't have an example in a home of a parent. Let's see, this is what I've been dealing with different friends, kids, and things like that. There's no apologies that are given even when someone is wrong. And so it's about communicating and getting back to talking and having that, yes, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that or said that. Even as an adult to a child, children remember those things very much so. The kids are very smart,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
They're very observant, and never underestimate a
Yes.
child's observances. They can totally tell you what's up with someone too. you know.
Right. Yeah. Totally. And that's something I've always kind of done with my kids as well. I never gave them the baby talk or anything like that. I and that was something, when we were first, found out we are having, our first daughter is, just like I never want to talk to them like they don't know what I'm talking about. I'm
Mhm.
never going to talk to them like they're stupid. I'm never going to do the goo goo gaga stuff.
Right.
And I'm always going to talk to them like they know exactly what I'm saying. And it hasn't failed me yet because I think most of the times they know and they understand. Even if they don't know everything that's going on, they can usually tell in your tone and how you're acting and what you're talking about, and to know whether something they're doing is right or wrong. And then yeah, like you're saying too, like when something's happened, if even if you've messed up, in something with them, is being able to own up and apologize for that, and just be real with them.
Right.
And I think it seems like too much these days, like parents are just, worried about, coddling their children and not them ever not getting hurt and things
Yeah.
like that. So then they're essentially not prepared for those disappointments and just those hits of reality that they'll eventually get.
Yeah. And
And
it can break them apart. I mean, I've seen like little ones, like, this sweet innocence, okay, of a very young child, and then they develop into young adults, and because of not having good communication at home, or just
right.
broken homes type, lots of arguing in the house, that kind of stuff. They just change and they shut down, and it's a really
Hmm.
heartbreaking thing because really it's something that could be alleviated with just conversation and having that. It's not perfect, but it would definitely bring them out of that,
Yeah.
and there was no apologies, there was no accountability, or maybe there was just never a conversation, and they weren't able to have a conversation with a parent. And it's hard. It's not easy. Some parents are difficult. I'm not going to lie. But at the same
Right.
time, it's on the parent to do that too. Like we had talked earlier before we went on just briefly about the small minions that we call our kids. That you know, our job as a parent is to prepare them to be in this world, to survive in this world long after we're gone, and
Right.
to understand that there are both good people and bad people, and that there are predators, okay, and that's in every sense of the word, opportunists or people who are just,
Hmm.
whatever that is, bullies, so on. But to also understand that they are people too. They're not just another, especially online, because the internet's kind of in a sense dehumanized this. It's
Hmm.
dehumanized people quite a bit in a sense of accountability and being genuine. I think, like, going back to that, but at the same time, this is all stuff that we work hard to show the kids, but they have
Right.
to see it in action too. It's hard. It's hard in a world where there's so many people that are, especially with the internet. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, your small marvels are still small, and mine are still. I have an eldest one, and he leads the pack a little bit. But the other two, it's having to explain to them not everything is what it seems online.
Right. Yeah.
you know, and not every you can't go to Disneyland every weekend. And
Right.
there's certain realities that come with living, and things look pretty in a picture, especially with girls, because that's rough. It's already started for me on my end here. Those little comments already, about uh, like, well, that girl's really pretty, or she wears makeup and she's my age. I'm like, no, she's no. I'm like, no, she's not. you know, that's called filters. Um,
Yeah.
But really having to drive that home with little ones, and for the boys, there's I'm always monitoring, especially with my middle one. I don't know how you are with your little ones about gaming and things like that, or what video games they can play and all this stuff. um, Everyone has a different thing. But I'm always kind of careful about what games are playing, specifically with my eldest. When he was young, I would not let him play Call of Duty for a long time, because it was this is back when it first came out. It was pretty violent, and I told him, I said, you need to understand, because our family, we come from a family of hunters, people who went hunting. My grandfather was a big hunter, so having what do you call it, the understanding of what guns are was a very big discussion, and it was for us because I grew up in a household with shotguns in the hallway, on a
Yeah.
on a gun rack and stuff like that. Or I go to my grandpa's and he'd have his same thing. And having that conversation with him, though, was adamant before. I would be like, this is a game, but you have to understand that guns in real life have ramifications, like being able to separate the fantasy a little bit and hopefully get that. I was worried about the level of aggression that could stir in him with him not understanding the repercussions of guns, if that makes sense. And I mean, I'm pro whatever, when it comes to guns, but I believe in education, and especially for young people, like, you don't touch a gun, that kind of thing, blah, 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 blah. We all tell our kids, if you see a gun, you don't touch that. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
with video games, that can sometimes, when they're young, especially if they're very young, that can desensitize them and they don't quite grasp it. So it's really up to the parent in that situation to have that talk, remotely. And so for a little while, I wouldn't let him play violent games until I felt like, okay, he has some common sense here. And my grandmother was involved quite a bit with that too, because she was a veteran, and she was an active veteran. She was deployed. So, she understood what I was trying to get across to him. So she explained to him what war was and what these video games were talking about, because they're mostly World War II games. And she was quite older, but very
Right.
sharp about things. But having the conversation with him at a young age, and so with your little ones, and I go back to little ones because it all ties into a lot of who we are as adults. Even though we have pieces from our childhood, when we start to have our own little minions, it really does change how we view things. We react differently to situations that, let's say, when we were without a kid, little, not so much indifferent. I loved kids. I'm sure we always wanted kids, that kind of thing. But there's a different feeling when it's your own, because then all of a sudden you're worried about everything as opposed to like one section. You know what I mean, of a book.
Right.
Now you're worried about the whole textbook. But
Yeah.
what are those things that you've had a conversation with the kids about, like, meaning just the wary conversation, meaning safety, or better yet, um, outside of, when it comes to entertainment or pop culture type things like films and games? What kind of things are they allowed, and what things are they kind of like a little, you kind of have to put a little filter on it because of age, or maybe maturity level, or whatever you want to call it?
Well, for the most part, like I haven't really been too worried about them being exposed to different things through most of the entertainment. I mean, pretty much what I tell them, especially like when it comes to movies,
Mm-hmm.
I always tell them like movies are fake. None of this stuff, and that's one thing we've always told them is none of this stuff you're watching on TV is real.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
I said none of it's real. If you're watching a movie, it's not real. It might be based on something that is real and sometimes something that has actually happened, but largely it's all fake. It's all actors, in
Mm-hmm.
front of cameras that are just doing their thing. And largely that's what I tell them, and all of it's fake for the most part. And when it comes down to obviously they get exposed to certain like actors and musicians and things like that
Mm-hmm.
by way of the movies and things like that as well. Is that these people are when they're on these cameras and doing these things, this is they're selling, they're entertainers. They're basically it's not really them.
Mm-hmm.
And just those kinds of things like that for the most part.
And
And
it
uh,
works. It works because
yeah.
you're already establishing, hey, that's fantasy. That's not real. And it does. That's an excellent, start to just getting it in their head that, listen, that's another place. Like, this is imaginary. Like, they're they're putting on a act or a play, you know.
Right.
And it's little ones especially. It's it's a little. I mean, I don't know. My eldest, when he for a long time believed that Stitch from Lilo and Stitch was a real thing.
Uh-huh.
And I had to explain. I'm like, no, we cannot get a Stitch. Like that is not happening. You can get a plush one. That's about it. Like
Right.
it's pretend. And he got it, but he was disappointed. And it's being able to separate the two. And then as they get older, there's new stuff that pops off. Well, I saw this. This person did this activity, especially with YouTube. Oh my gosh. You know, oh man, there's just so much on YouTube, like families doing different activities and this, kind of euphoric reality, you
Right.
know, and that I've had to have that conversation already with the youngest squirrel and explain to her, I'm like, listen, this family is being paid by a company. Okay, to go to these parks or to experience these different events and things like that. They're not just getting in for free. I had to explain to her they're
Right.
getting paid. And she's like, oh. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, this isn't what it seems. So it's being able to detach the two. And I'm always having to do that, even from school because of other kids. Some kids really just believe that everything on Instagram is real.
Right. Yeah. And then I think that's kind of really part of it is, I mean, I think just too much these days parents don't actually parent their kids. They're not there being active in their lives, seeing what they're doing, whether it's on social media or just paying attention to what they're cognizant of when it comes to like movies and just any of the arts for the
Yeah.
most part. And I think that's for me, I think that's one of the most important things. I mean, as a parent to do is to actually parent, to pay attention to your kids, to be active in their lives. And it's not like you have to sit there, and be a helicopter parent because like
Right.
that's even to me that's even worse is to be one of those helicopter parents. It has to be every little thing. Your kid falls in, trips in the house. Oh, you got to pick him up. Are you okay? Are you okay? Yes, it's fine,
Right.
um just those kinds of things. I mean, ultimately, I mean, it doesn't take too much. I think sometimes, when maybe people think that, having to attend to their kids is a chore and it takes too much, and I see that in some people. It's like it's really not. Like, you don't have to be, and I remember seeing some of these cheesy videos on like Facebook, and I'm sure they're probably
Mm-hmm.
done by some guy that's here on YouTube that like, oh, we spend too much time on our phones staring at these screens instead of what about your fellow man sitting next to you? When was the last time? Just all these things. Like that's being too hyper too. Like that's fake.
Right.
There are people who are like that spend a lot of time online and in media and stuff like that. But when it comes to your kids, like that's okay. You don't have to spend every single waking minute with them. You
No.
can let them watch a movie and ignore them and do your own thing.
Right.
Like the just because you had the kid, it's not the end of your personal life, and
Mm-hmm.
I know some people feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you don't have to invest that. You just have to. The most important time to invest in your kids is while they're little. No, those formative years. I mean, I would say at least like the first 5 years of their life, you definitely want to be like heavily involved in in helping develop who they are and getting them to be smart and to be able functioning citizens, I guess you
Mm-hmm.
could
Yeah.
say. That's the most important time. After that, I mean, really, I mean, you don't have to they don't need all your undivided attention, and
Right.
giving them too much can be just as bad as giving them absolutely none.
Absolutely true. And it's like with the eldest squirrel, like when he's okay, bless him. He doesn't like he's one of those boys it's like I don't need no cuddles, relax. Like one of those. So,
Mm.
not a lot of cuddles, not a lot of hugs. He was always like this ever since he was very young. He was just not liking clinginess and tell my mother that. That's funny. So, I'm like grandma's going to get her way. Nanny is on the case. But as far as that, he was just, he had his own sensibility, and I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. And I give him his distance, and he was able. Kids are very. That's one thing. When I was young, and I don't know how you were brought up, but and this ties into what we're talking about here, is that when we were little, were you kind of like were your parents kind of like, no, you can't watch TV, go do something, meaning go play outside, just go play, but not on the TV, meaning you don't need the entertainment of the TV. But were they the kind of parent that would be like, you know what, go outside? go do something.
Not really. And I think that's just because we spent kind of a lot of our time just doing different things anyway. And we grew up 13 miles out in the country from the
Mm,
city where we lived at.
okay.
But again, we had my grandma next door to us.
Mhm.
On the other side of us, our other next door neighbor was my uncle, and for another little while, across the road from us was my other uncle as well. So we had a lot of family near us. Even the other neighbors we knew pretty well. But and believe me, we had all the resources. I mean, don't get me wrong. I spent a lot of time watching TV shows and movies and things like that as well. But because we like when I was growing up, we had a satellite dish and we had the descrambler chips, so we got all those channels things
Right.
we could want to watch. And believe me, we watched a lot. But I mean, we grew up out in the country, so we had a trampoline. We did that. My grandma had a swimming pool. We did plenty of things outside. It was just such a mixture of different things.
Mhm.
And plus, I mean, my parents like they weren't always there for us, and I don't mean that to sound bad. Like my dad, he worked at night. My mom
Mhm.
worked during the day.
Mhm.
So we would get home from school. The school bus would drop us off. My father, a lot of times, he'd still be sleeping from work the night before.
Right.
And so we'd get home, my grandma was still next door. We knew she was there, but we'd get home, we'd, have a snack, do our homework or whatnot, and then just watch some TV or go outside and play and just did our own thing. I mean, we were largely unsupervised, but we weren't just like alone though, neither.
Right. Well,
And
that's an independence thing. That's a kind of where I was getting at is um when I was young, it was like they would just be like go, basically serve yourself, meaning go, go find something to do instead of, grabbing onto a TV show or whatever. I was always being kicked. Always getting kicked out of the house for something just so I could get outside, which was fine. I got, when you're very little, that's the beginning of it. And then after that, you couldn't keep me inside for very long. And it was just to get me. I loved being outdoors doing stuff, like riding bikes or heading around, going to see friends or whatever. And I was pretty young, and that independent, but that helped develop basically not being. Kept myself busy, so I was never. I get bored, but there was nothing wrong with being bored. That was the other thing. Is it started to click as I got older. It's okay to be bored, because really it's not. You're not bored. You're just, you need something to fulfill your time, so you find something to occupy your time. Whether that's for better or for worse is another story.
right. Yes. Yeah, and we grew up doing a lot of things too. Like I grew up like I said, we had, the satellite TV to watch. We had a Nintendo, we had toys. We lived out in the country, so we had bikes, we had scooters, we had all kinds of things to do stuff. But then I mean, me and my sister, we also grew up loving to read books. We
Mm,
actually like to read and things like that. And that's why these days I'm glad that my kids are good at reading and they actually like reading as well, because it's nice to see them doing that as well, because it seems like that's becoming something that's lost these days too, especially with
yeah,
the advent of your iPads and your computers and your phones and things like that. It seems like it's becoming less and less prevalent in society, and not that it's not out there, it just seems like there's less of that going on with kids,
I
although
agree.
I could be very very well be wrong.
No, I agree. I think that with books, I think for me, I'm a big book person. I appreciate books. I think it's a very positive thing to read, especially for people like kids, because it helps with the imagination. They're visualizing things, even without pictures. They're visualizing events and scenarios and stories. That imagination is something that I don't think people we're running. It feels like we're running on fumes with imagination to some extent with kids. Like they're not being left to develop imagination because there's so much stuff to
Right.
occupy that space. And I think books are a fantastic way of helping with imagination and imagining and visualizing things that are, no matter what it is, those books and those stories help them create their own scenarios and their own gameplay. Just like how video games can do that to an extent, to a point, but it's still, I think books are the more intense way of helping children, especially even young adults, even adults, develop imagination because you're having to visualize these things in your head based on details or maybe a character, the way they look. and sometimes maybe there isn't a description of how they look, so you have to imagine what they look like so you can place it into the storyline. So it's like I think books have a magic of their own. I really do. I think it's fantastic for kids to have books, physical books, even. Back in my
Yeah.
day, we had books with paper. I swear to God, we
Yeah.
sound old, but it's true. I mean, when I see Kindles, I'm like, that's not the same. It's not that same magic.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like, you know. But so what books were you guys reading what were the favorite books you would read when you were young?
When I was young, I remember I liked to read a lot of books that were based on movies. Like, there was a movie getting ready to come out, and I would read the book
Mm-hmm.
of, that was, based on the movie, things like that. Those were some of my favorites. But I remember when I was a young kid, I actually, I don't know, I probably got a good halfway, maybe, I don't know, maybe a little past halfway reading The Stand.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah,
There's a
and
read.
after yeah, and after reading that, like that's kind of when gave up on fiction. I'm like, it's kind of like, man, I don't know that there's anything really better than this, right? I mean, what
Right.
could be better than The Stand? I mean, because like you're saying, like with the imagination and everything, like I remember reading that, like, holy crap, like I can see this world the way he wrote it, like I can
Mm-hmm.
see it. I feel like I'm living in it and breathing it. Um, and like that was, I think that was pretty much what broke my thing with fiction, was reading that book. I stopped reading fiction at that point, and that's when I started reading just other, just different kinds of books. But I think up to that point, that's what it was for a large part, was reading like some of those movie adaptations,
Mm-hmm.
comic books as well.
Mm-hmm.
um and then obviously when you're kids, you read like, the little golden books and things like that.
Right.
Definitely remember those. But yeah, largely I think I really started with things that were like that, like the movie adaptations. Because there's one book I actually remember. It wasn't a movie or anything, but I'm surprised it never got turned into one. But I remember, and I even checked it out from the library. It was this book called Dr. Dredd's Wagon of Wonders.
Whoa.
And yeah, it was a really crazy book. And for some reason, I think back on it now, it kind of reminded me somewhat of like maybe like a Pete's Dragon kind of thing.
Okay.
And I was really into that book, and maybe I need to go see if I can find that and buy it.
So it's
But
called Dr. Dredd's what?
Dr. Dredd's Wagon of Wonders.
Wow, I've never even heard of that book. So I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, have I even heard of this book? And I looked it up while we're sitting here, and it is for sale on Amazon.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and it has a little dragon there. That's cool. Yeah, I've never heard of this book. It came out in 1987, and the author is Bill Britton. And
All right.
that's okay. I'll send you the link to that. That's cool. Yeah, like I was interested to see what books people read when they were young because it's one of those things where you're like, oh God, what books did I pick up and which ones was I interested in and things like that. And it is
Yeah.
it does blow your mind a little bit when you think about it and just how that uh, there's a link there and the chat. Why not? Screw it. Anyway, but yeah, that's the book. But yeah, I always find it interesting because I was into like I liked legends, urban legends. I loved ghost stories. I loved paranormal stories, and like they used to have these series of books. Now I'm blanking on the author, but a very popular author. He runs like a Bigfoot museum, I think now, but he did all of these books about uh, interesting animals and cryptoids and unusual sightings and all that type of stuff. I loved books like that because it started out with like scary stories to tell in the dark, and then after that, I was like, I want more. I want to know more urban legends. I want to know more spooky stuff, and I got into that big time. That's what got me reading, and then I just kind of expanded outside of that into fantasy, but more fantasy driven. But yeah, it's a book. Reading books, there is a magic to going to the library or the bookstore and finding a book, a brand new book, and picking up and just checking out to see what it was about. So yeah, especially with children, I find it very fascinating
Yeah.
because the kids are your now what? Okay, this is one of those things too. What are the kids reading now? That's very different. Um, well, obviously, it's going to be a little bit different than what we had, but what books are they reading that they're interested
Well,
in?
my daughters have been reading a lot of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Mm,
They've
okay.
they've
Mhm.
been reading several of those books. I'm surprised we don't have a whole shelf full. Actually, we do have a shelf full of them. I don't know. I think they've probably got about a good 4 or 5 of them. Like those for the most part. I know one I've been wanting to get for them as well as like the Harry Potter books because they're into the movies and they kind of like that world as well. So I'm like, hey, why not? I know you can buy like the collection of them for however much, like on Amazon or whatnot.
Mhm.
And I've thought about getting that for them as well. And just things like that. Yeah, kind of expand their something they'll be interested in.
Yeah.
That's to me ultimately what's the most important. But yeah, they definitely like those Diary of a Wimpy Kid books because I don't know. I guess they're just funny
Mhm.
tales of kids going through life. And I think that's just learning, just hearing stories like that we can kind of all relate to is probably something that they like. Something
Yeah.
funny and entertaining.
It's like I know for a little while the kids were into Captain Underpants in our house. So it
Yes.
was Captain
Yeah.
Underpants, and then it was Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And my eldest son is still a reader, but his is more I would say nonfiction historical stuff that he reads. So every Christmas he gets two books, random books that fit into what he's looking at. He loves historical stuff, and with my middle son, he struggled for a long time with reading. He's a very good reader, but it's the comprehension we've been working on. So, um, because my son has special needs, preface to what I'm saying, in case people just popped onto the video. So
Yeah.
he has a hard time. I just realized that. I'm like, let's just preface that. So his reading is fantastic. He's a very good reader, but when it comes down to comprehension, he gets lost. But comic books were a great way to get him reading, and from comic books, we were able to get him in. He's now reading the Choose Your Own Adventure books,
Oh yeah, those were always fun.
and they are still making them. They still continue to make new types of editions of them, and there's a lot of different genres out there too that are very much mimicking the same formula. But that is one way that he's been reading, and I'm like, oh right, I'll buy you as many as you need, or we'll go to the library and take them all. But it's got him
Yeah.
reading. But it's funny because I saw them and I thought back nostalgically. I'm like, oh man, I remember these at the library, and they were always like ripped
Yeah.
apart. And
Yeah.
really,
From choosing your own adventure.
oh yeah, somebody was choosing their own adventure, all right. 'Cause that book, like, it went through Armageddon and back. But, but yeah, he loves these books, and I'm like, God, it's simple things, that bring him back. And I had all my copies of scary, the original ones, the scary stories to tell in the dark, and they read those at Halloween, of course, and they loved it because there's like parts in there where they can quote jump scare each other and things like that. So books do bring out some of the best memories too, music and books, of course, but it is funny how all these things do connect to who we are as adults. Um, but we talked a little bit, like, obviously, we talked a lot about the kids and so on. What is something, and this is a little broader question, but what is something that you want more out of life? If you had one thing to pick, what would be that one thing you would want more of in life right now?
One thing more of. Um, I guess I mean for the most part, just time, really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's all I can really think of, just because there's so many things that I like, so many things that I'm into. I just wish there was more hours in a day. I wish we're just
Yeah.
so limited by time so much and trying to squeeze everything in because I want to have time for for going out and doing my workouts, getting my bike rides in, spending time with the kids, watching a new movie, watching a new TV series, reading a new comic book. I think that for the most part, that's really it. Is ultimately time. The one
Mm-hmm.
thing that we just can't get more of.
Yeah, it's an endangered species. It really is. I don't- I feel like two things of that. Like these years when the kids are very young, these years fly by, and then when you
Yeah,
look back, you're like, what the hell? Like I remember, like having to burp you, and now you're like telling me how you're gonna go, to go skating or whatever with your friends, and you're like 14 out the door, that kind of thing. It's very quick, and that's one thing I agree with absolutely is time. If I, one thing, it would be time because it's irreplaceable, and once it's gone, and it time flies, especially as and then you look at when your birthdays fly by, and then one day they tell you, oh yeah, you're going to be this age, you're like, liar.
yeah.
That's a lie. So then on the opposite side of that question is, what do you want less in your life of? Like if you had one thing you could say, you know what, I want less of that. What would that be?
Um, things less in my life. Um, I would guess, you know what, maybe well, I would say bills, but that ultimately comes down to it's somewhat economics, which
Right.
would necessarily around the government.
Right? You're like,
less,
not
less government would be great.
not saying no government. I'm just saying less government. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it seems to be the one thing that the government seems to be the one thing that seems to roadblock everybody's life.
Mhm.
Anything great that could be going on is just made harder by the way of the government, whether it's through the fact that, and not to get too political, but
No, go
like
for it.
through taxing us, our income and things like that. To I mean, just regulating, saying we can and can't do this, and people make judgments on people based on those things. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And that to me is terrible. Yet everybody seems to act like they want more government intervention in their lives. Like these things, even with here on YouTube with COPPA and all that
Oh
stuff. Like
God. Yeah.
this
Mhm.
this is coming about because parents can't just parent their damn kids.
Right.
The government shouldn't have to step in for you and say, hey, we're going to make sure that YouTube or the internet is safe for your kids. That's
Man.
just like
Mm.
it's ridiculous to me. And I don't get, like, every single thing. It seems like these days comes down to they need to ban this, they need to ban that, there needs to be a law against this, there needs to be a law against that. How about we just go back to the basics of the three good laws, no raping, no murdering, and no stealing.
Right. There.
Everything else can sort itself out.
Right. I think we have way too much government overreach into privacy. That's a big one. But the language and this COPA thing, I, I mean, I warned about this like many months ago. I might have been on the late night stream. And I was pointing out nobody understood why I was having an issue because this COPA thing isn't, oh, suddenly it's here. It's been in the works for a while. And I'm like, listen, this is just overreach. This is their way of censoring people and also getting rid of the undesirables and things like that because you can easily say anything is um, appealing to a child. It could be something as simply as an avatar. My
Right,
squirrel could attract other kids who like little kids who like squirrels. I don't know, you know. So,
right,
but they're overreach into that, and people are flipping out and wanting all these things. Well, let's stop this. Let's stop this. Well, you need to stay awake to the fact that they're going to keep doing different things, especially as we get closer to the election, and that's the truth. Um, the stuff really went into high gear post Trump, because of everything that happened, and they were
yeah,
blaming YouTube, they were blaming Facebook, they were blaming Twitter for not censoring people, and now they're getting their way in different aspects. At least they'll have the controls. May not get their way, but they have the controls in place to do whatever they want. So really, you're at the mercy of corporations as to whether or not you're going to have your rights in one shape or form. And it's
right,
because while you were sleeping and worrying about Star Wars, these assholes were busy writing legislation. I'm just saying,
right,
you know, I love Star
right,
Wars like everyone else, dude. And I'm an old school Marvel fan, so a lot of the films don't appeal to me the same way. It's just I'm picky about that. But of course, I love my fandoms, but these are the coliseums. So you have to be aware of what's outside the coliseum, which is your politics and your finances, your economics, all that fun stuff, and foreign relations, all these things that can affect your daily lives. you know. Um,
right.
so when people say, when we're talking about, oh, this is I went on a rant earlier today. I was talking to Calm Squirrel. There's a reason why he's called Calm Squirrel, but he's very calm. But I was telling him, I said, people are flipping out about COPA, but these are also the same people who were telling me they don't want to be involved in politics.
Right.
Well, I don't know what to tell you, man. You got a social security number, right? Yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
you're unfortunately we're already in the system whether we like it or not, and we do have a voice, we do have a vote, we do have an opinion. Now whether or not that matters, it depends, I guess, on who you know and what state. But you should definitely, be aware that they're trying to regulate things in a certain direction, and it's not always for the think of the children. It's more like think of the corporations that want this. What would be the purpose of getting rid of anybody that's against, let's say, pop culture things, or having opinions that are adjacent to the corporation where they can take you down and claim whatever they want. So you have to be, it's just about being careful about what they're trying to push. I do think Cope
Right.
is a piece of crap, but I digress. I went on my little political anti-establishment rant, but I don't like them being in the households. I don't like them. The control, especially with children, I think is very bizarre. There's a lot of bizarre behavior in public schools about children and quote welfare of children, where it seems more about, I would say, control, or being
Right.
involved in households. Let's put it that way, or getting way too involved in the families. Um, and I think that this is part of that. This whole like we have to parent your children because you don't want to, I guess, or they think that
Right.
they have entitlement to do so. It's all connected. It's just a question of what, the origination, like who started it and why is it being carried and who's lobbying for it.
Right. Yeah, and that's something I don't get, like why people want more like government intervention and things like that. I mean, you can already see how dysfunctional the government is anyway in the first place. Without them, without you basically inviting them into your lives to regulate even more things. And again, it comes down to personal responsibility.
Hmm.
And it's like these days, like nobody just wants to have any of that.
No
Um,
accountability. No
Yeah.
accountability whatsoever. It just goes back to when we were talking about parenting. It's these, I say these kids when I get frustrated because that's exactly how I feel. I don't care how old you are, you're a kid when you act like an idiot. And they don't understand that this road that we're going down is ultimately, if you can say, well, that's hate speech, or your child shouldn't be outside playing in the back of your own backyard alone because the neighbor looked over the fence and saw them playing on the swing set by themselves in your own backyard. You have way too many people trying to, they want the village is trying to raise the children, but the village has no clue what the hell the village is doing. And
Right.
the government thinks it's trying to take over these roles. That's the way it feels. Like I'm the new dad, or I'm the new mom, and we're gonna call the shots and tell you what we think is safe for your children, or what education is okay, good enough. Let's put it that in those words, good enough for your children. I had to pull my eldest son out of the school system because it was so bad in public school when he got to, I want to say, late element. No, that's, I would say middle school age. I pulled him out
Mhm.
in middle school because it was so bad that he was behind. I mean, his English went into the toilet. His mathematics was absolutely crap. He had no history whatsoever, and I homeschooled him for about 4 years, 5 years, and he was ahead when he went back in, and he was in AP because that's how far, and it was, and it's not, and I have two other squirrels, so it's not like I had all this free time. I just knew the curriculum and how to intermingle it, but also to get him up to par. But it seemed like he was behind, and they weren't teaching phonics with reading, so we've had to work with my youngest squirrels to get them on the right track, because they don't teach phonics at all in school anymore. It's all sight
Mhm.
words, and
Right.
that's not reading. Sight words is memorization, you know.
Right.
So they don't. So the parent, that's our job now. It should have always been this, but to help them sound out words, something as simple as phonics, like sounding a word out, speaking, speaking it out loud, having them read a book to you, or you read a book to them, and go back and forth a little. Those like simple skills are being taken away from parents, saying, "Oh no, we have this, we got this, don't worry about it." But this is how you end up with children in high school that don't know how to read, or in college. That blows my mind. It blows
Yeah.
my mind that there are people that are still not able to read. There's no excuse for that. This is not. This is our current climate of education, and there are some fantastic schools out there, but they're not going to be urban schools. That's for sure.
Right.
And
No
if
child left behind.
Oh, thanks, Bill. Appreciated that. Thank you, Bush. You guys are awesome. You guys together, top notch. Like, and they both did a fantastic job with that. And the No Child Left Behind. I'm going on a rant, but I don't mean to. But my middle son, he has special needs. He has severe autism, and it's classic autism. So he was struggling with everything, and so we got him. He had some fantastic teachers out of pocket paid for programs, like curriculum that would help him and dozens of other students learn how to read phonically, because the crap that these states were handing out was crap. It doesn't teach them how to read properly. There is no solutions, and this is what's frustrating with with all the kids to some greater extent. But if you have a child with special needs, you absolutely should be involved, because it's a lot of the schools do not. For example, a lot of states will put a son such as mine into a regular classroom because it's part of integration. Okay, of integrating. There's too many kids with autism now, so they have to just leave them in the regular classroom,
Mm-hmm.
and the teachers do not have curriculum ahead of time for these students. So,
Right.
so that means my son went a full 2 school years, and despite intervention and all these discussions and IEP meetings or whatever the hell you want to call it, there was still no curriculum set up. It was very much having to figure it out as they go, and they still never had one. So he wasn't ahead. He was failing all the state testing for his grade, and he should have been held back 2 or 3 times, and they refused to. And the reasons I've been given, well, the first reason was twice the same reason was, oh well, he'll have, if we hold him behind, he won't have any friends. What? Uh, Lady, he doesn't have that kind of friendships right now. Like
Right.
my son doesn't. Okay, whatever. So I was like, fine, we'll see how next year goes. And the next year it happened again, and that reason was different. This time it was some other bullshit. It was just, it didn't make any sense. The reasoning, it didn't apply. Basically, oh, this is what they told me. Well, when he goes to his next school, because he was transitioning at that point, he would be going to big boy middle school. They said that, well, they'll have the resources at that school. We don't have them. So that's how they treat the special educational students.
Right.
They're
Pass the
floating
buck.
them through. Yeah,
Yeah. Pass the buck.
exactly. And so with regular children, they're doing the same thing, but in different ways. But there is programs that they're rolling out into public schools that raise red flags for me as a parent. And they'll never. I had it happen where, because I pay attention, we all do, to like, okay, well, what are you doing in school? And a lot of this stuff is over our head in some cases. And other stuff, it's just the way they're teaching it that's a little over the head. I think it's not so much the actual work; it's how they're teaching this crap. But it's other stuff that raise my flags, like they have mental health programs they roll out into the schools. And I thought that was quite interesting because I got to look at the actual documentation for this one particular program they rolled out in we lived in New Mexico, and I looked at the actual manuals that the teachers got, because when I asked the principal what the name of the program was that they were rolling out, because it was some kind of anti-bullying program and all this crap, I was asking him about it, and he wouldn't give me the name, but I got the name of the program, looked it up, got the actual documentation because other parents and teachers posted it online because they had a problem with it. And in the curriculum, it specifically says if the child does something wrong, this is just an example of many things. This one stuck out and stuck with me. If your child, you got the, if your little Marvel got into trouble in school, basically what they would say is, well, don't in the God, this is so much. This is so crazy. In the documentation from the school, it said this mental health program was to tell the parent that the school would handle discipline, that the parent should not discipline the child at home. In those words, and
Yeah.
reinforced
No.
it several times. And I thought, who the hell are you? And I looked at the program of who owned the program. It was a corporation, pharmaceutical corporation, that had a lobbying contract with the U.S. government for mental health programs. I'm not saying there's a conspiracy. I'm just saying that was very interesting to me, Merc. you know,
Right. Right.
but it woke me up.
Yeah.
It woke me up a little bit more to what, I had already experienced stuff with the eldest son because, I had him very young. I wasn't 16 by any means, but I had him young. And with the others, I mean, time has passed. So I've talked to other parents, especially special needs parents. I've talked to regular neotypical kids, like my eldest Squirrel, your kiddos. You know, uh, they are experiencing things very differently in different regions of the country because some curriculum is a little more advanced in some areas, some other areas are maybe behind. But there is definitely a very small movement, and it's gotten more significant in higher population states. In some states, it's higher because of funding or lobbying, where they're pushing a disconnection, I think, between parents and their children through the schools. And,
Right.
that always, I don't know, there was something, what's her name? I can't remember anybody's politician name. There's too many Democrat nominees. I can't say one of the candidates for the for the presidency because there's too many of them. But one of the ladies made a comment. Um, I want to say it's Kamala, about how the kids
Yeah.
she wants to keep the kids on longer school days at the school, and she was pushing for this. And a lot of districts are already doing this with feeding the kids supper.
Yeah.
And
No.
I find that, I mean, I don't know what your take is on this, meaning opinions, but I think it's odd. And I'm like, no, my kids can come home after school. They
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like the schools, they're trying to, how would you say, create quote unquote productive citizens is what they want.
Mm-hmm.
They want people who are going to basically feed the system. They're going to wake up every morning and be slaves to a time clock, to somebody else's time in a corporate America, just trying to generate more money for them. That's
Yeah.
ultimately what they want.
Yep.
They want mindless, just they want automatons is what they want,
Yes.
so they can easily be molded and things like that. And that's why I think, especially, I mean, for one, I just that's something even young Ripa talks about all the time, is take your kids out of public schools.
Yep.
And the thing is, because and that's the reason why, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with the public schools as long as you are active in your
Yes.
children's life
Yeah.
and making sure that they know right from wrong, making sure that they're learning the actual life lessons that they need to function in society. And I know when I worked at my old job, that's one of the things I dealt a lot of with was, just seeing people, like, even people who aren't even that much younger than me, seeing how just how different it is. They're maybe it's through the schooling or whatnot, how they are, like, you know they're waiting to be told what to do. And it's like,
Yes.
no, think for yourself.
Absolutely.
What would you do?
Right.
You
I
know,
agree with
uh,
that.
I
We
would
were
have-
just
yeah, I
talking
would have
about
people,
this. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would have people coming to me. I'm not even their supervisor. They'd be like, "Oh, what should we do next?" Like, well, a couple of them I just sent to the manager, say, "Hey, go tell the manager you don't have anything to do." Yeah, that'll teach you a lesson, right?
Oh, exactly. I don't know
And
what I should do. It's like, oh, there's no self initiative, like the self
yeah,
starting.
yeah, and that's where I would start with, with things like that. And that's, where I kind of got into some of the leadership roles that I got, is because what I would do is I would take time to set people down and show them what to do. Think about their job. Think about these things. These things should be so easy. Just like, you come in. I mean, we're working at a retail center here. You come in, you stock shelves. What's so hard about that? You run out of stuff to stock, go find more stuff to stock.
Right.
It's pretty simple.
Right.
Clean things up while you're going along, make it look nice, make it look presentable. um yeah, I mean, you
It's.
should always have something to do. Like, if you're at that kind of a place, in that kind of a job, in that kind of a job setting,
Mm-hmm.
you shouldn't ever go to somebody and be wondering what you need to be doing. You should know. But again, that comes down to, obviously, sometimes, with the training and the leadership and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
that just it's not there. And unfortunately, I think a lot of that comes down to the school systems.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think we were just talking about this because example, Squirrel had just recently had surgery this past week. Nothing big, but that particular, and among others, this is just one of many we've dealt with this issue where making an appointment, example, somebody who works in reception, you're doing multitasking. You're doing, it is not the easiest job in the world. Treat receptionists and people with respect. As long as they're respectful to you, you shouldn't have a problem. But they're the hardest job, is being able to answer the phones, keep on, if you're doing appointments or referrals or whatever you're doing, there's a multitude of tasks you're doing. But for whatever reason, for Squirrel and also Elder Squirrel, they've all dealt with this repeatedly. People are half-assing their jobs. So it's almost like, example, a referral needed to be sent, for insurance reasons to the proper specialist for whatever procedure or need. And they would never send it. You would have to call and babysit them over the phone at the moment they're faxing it because that's how they needed to be walked through it. They didn't even have, like, they would be as lazy enough, and I say lazy because it really was, not to even have a fax number, even though they're the ones that are supposed to get this on their own. You would have to supply it for them to do their job. And this has happened at multitude of different offices. And the lack of follow through, the lack of initiative, and the accountability that's necessary. Um, you'll rarely get an apology, and if you do, it's by duress, like their job's at stake or they're on the hot plate. And I understand that, this could be from, it could be for a multitude of things, but it definitely goes back to schooling. It obviously is about parenting. It's all these different factors. Accountability is just gone because I remember every job I ever had, if I got done with a task, I knew immediately I needed to get on to something else, or already had a priority in line, and that I guess multitasking is not something they're capable of doing without someone holding their hand or laying it out for them very specifically. And even then, they still come back and say, "Well,
Right.
I did everything I was supposed to do," and you look over and you're like, "Actually, no, you didn't. Go clean your room
Yeah.
again."
Right.
you know. But yeah, it's a very good points though about all of that mess. It's just everything links to each other in some way, and sometimes it's just a question of getting there. But yeah, I wanted to start wrapping everything up because I know you got your small marvels and I got my small squirrels to deal with. Much love to all
Yes.
of them, but life is life. And the Miss Marvel and Com Squirrel can only handle so much to a point with love.
Right.
So at the one of the things I've been doing at the end of some of the episodes is by Stig's suggestion, because I had done one with him and he asked if we could do it, and I thought, oh, that'd be fun. Is the Pivo questionnaire. The Pivo questionnaire, for those who don't know, is a small questionnaire of 10 questions. It was on a show called Inside the Actor Studio with James Lipton. And it was kind of like a segment, though, with different celebrities, producers, directors, actors, actresses, and they have like one-on-one discussions. But at the end of the show, they would always ask these 10 questions, which comes from Bernard Pivot, which is the bouillon de culture. I'm not French, Mazel tov. And anyway, but they would ask these 10 questions, and they kind of give you a little bit of point of view and perspective into the person we've been talking to a little bit today. So I'm going to start, if you're ready, with the first
Yeah.
question. Okay. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word? Oh shit. Probably that. Probably shit.
All right. It's a perfect word, isn't it?
It is.
It's very versatile. What is your least favorite word?
My least favorite word. Ooh, man. Ah, my least favorite word. I'm not sure that it's necessarily a least favorite word as much as it is a saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at that point it's agree to disagree.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with disagreeing. We don't
Right.
have to agree on anything.
Yeah, it's annoying. That's a little annoying phrase.
Yes.
Okay. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Realness.
Okay.
Just people being real. And that comes in many different forms. Maybe, but honestly, just realness in people. Seeing that kind of, you can always tell when somebody's being real and when they're being genuine a lot of times. At least I can.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that's something definitely is people being real.
Okay. And then in the opposite spectrum, what turns you off?
What turns me off?
Mm-hmm.
Hate.
Mm. Yep. Okay, so what is your favorite curse word?
My favorite curse word.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a difficult one because I don't really look at any kinds of words as really being curse words. But I mean, that being the case, it would obviously be the F word. I mean, I think, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that is fair. There's a fuck is a very magical word.
Yes.
I love certain words, even if they're highly like I love fuck twat. Favorite word. I don't know why. It's just so perfect. Sometimes you're just like stop being a fuck twat. It's beautiful. So what sound or noise do you love?
What sound or noise do I love? Oh, man. I think one of the sounds I love the most is hearing Devin Townsend play guitar.
Oh, nice, nice. What sound or noise do you hate?
Um, what sound or noise do I hate? I can't really think of one in particular that I dislike. Um, sound or noise do I hate? Man, I really can't. I can't really can't think of one for that. Because I know a lot of people think of like nails scratching on like chalkboard and stuff like that.
Right.
Um, yeah, I can't really think of one. I can't really think of that. There's of a sound or anything that I hate.
Yeah, most people it's varies like the nails on a chalkboard, sirens, things like that. Um,
I maybe you know what?
hmm.
Silence.
Oh,
Sometimes I hate silence, and not all the time. Sometimes it's good, but I think a lot of times I think that that's it. Is silence.
yeah. It can be unsettling sometimes when it's too silent. Like I don't know, for an extended period of time, it's like okay, I need to do something about this. Okay, what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Definitely an actor.
Okay. What profession would you not like to do?
Mm, I'm not sure. Does being a politician count as a profession?
Yes.
I think probably that.
It wouldn't go well in America that day. You'd be like, well, he's not getting elected and he's okay with that.
Right.
Okay, so the last question is if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You know what? I hate to be all Goodwill Hunting, but if that was the scenario, if there
Right.
was a God and all that, it would have to be. It would probably be, like I said, going Goodwill Hunting here is it's not your fault.
Mm, I think that's fair. Yeah, like honestly, um I've heard that one other time from someone, and I can't recall who it was off the top of my head. But we've also had God apologizing to people, which is a big one. So, in my opinion, it's one of those things where it's like sometimes that would be the most reassuring thing in the world to hear, especially
Right.
at that moment. But I am really grateful though you spent time with me today. I know it gets very busy during the week, especially when we have you have business, you have all this stuff to take care of outside of like the virtual world. So I really appreciate you taking time to hang out and chill. And we could have probably gone longer, but I know I had to bring it down a bit because of time. I wanted to be respectful to everybody, especially when you got kids. But please go ahead and plug your channel so people know where to find you and where your content is, and also on Twitter where they can find you there.
Well, again, thank you for having me on for one. Actually, just hearing some of these great interviews you've been doing with people, I've kind of been thinking like, yeah, maybe she'll eventually get to me. I'm not gonna ask. I'm not gonna beg, but it would be an honor to be on your show. But yeah, you guys can find me at any time here on YouTube at the Second Street Marvel, or you can even find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at the Second Street Marvel. Spelled like it's not spelled out like the word Second Street. It's 2ND Street
Mm-hmm.
Marvel.
And there will be pop-ups on the screen that people will see your stuff. I usually add that on most of the videos. So right now I have up on the screen your Twitter, and it's at Second Street Marvel, and then also your YouTube channel.
I hate to interrupt you, but really, my wife don't like my stuff being on display, especially my Twitter.
Oh, okay.
Never mind.
Oh my God. I was like, really? I'm like, oh my. And I felt bad. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, well, no. See, that's how I get sucked into things so easily because I'm like, your privacy's important to me. I'm that person. I'm that mother. That's great. You know, you stirred the mother gene. That's what that was. I was like, oh, clutch the pearls. Oh my God. Oh
Uh,
man, you got me. That's good. No, yep, yep. But yeah, but you can find Second Street at all these uh, links, and also if there's any other links, let me know, and I'll make sure to add those in the description box so they can find you there too. Um, yeah. So if there's anything projects wise you have it coming up, do you have anything coming up as far as videos? Because I know you do a lot of you do your live streams and things like that. But is there any videos or anything you'd like to plug coming up this week or going into next?
Not really. I mean, I just got some comic book reviews getting ready to go up. I know I've got a video shot right now that'll probably be premiering probably later, if not tonight, maybe tomorrow, about the X-Men. And they just recently kind of rebooted them in the Marvel universe. And what titles, because there's 6 new
Mm-hmm.
titles that spun out of this thing. Which ones that you should read, and kind of my ranking list of what ones I think are of the most importance to least important.
Cool. I dig that. Yep. Yeah, I've been picking up comics and stuff. I collect all the Elvira ones, except for
Oh
like,
yeah,
that not the they have this other one I can't remember. It's another Elvira series and it sucks, but it's the primary one I'm collecting that initially just came started out. So I've been collecting those, and I go in and I grab Marvel, the Monster series, that came out with Marvel. Um, I have my youngest loves it, and it's kind of it's a lot. The art in it's fantastic, but the other series is what is it? Batman: The White Knight series, beautiful. But anyway, yeah, those are the books we've been hunting. I go with the eldest because he's into Carnage, or yeah, it's Carnage time for him. So
yeah,
we're always at a comic book store. So hey, let me know if you're ever looking for a book and you can't find it. Um, but yeah. But anyway, everyone can find Second Street at his channels and check out his videos. His reviews are really great, especially if you can't immediately get out to grab the book, but you've either had an opportunity to read it, but you're not sure yet if you want to kind of continue on. It's good to go back and look at some of his reviews on some of the older ones to newer ones, because I know people that are always collecting comic books. So even if something's quote not in the store, they go back and try to order copies. So that's why I like going to your channel, because I can go back and like look at particular comic book reviews you've done and decide, oh, should I go and get this? You know what I mean? And have it in the collection, or get this particular series number. You know,
yeah.
one of those people. Anyway, I am that person. But anyway, thank you so much again for coming on. I really do appreciate all your time today, and I hope everyone that listened had fun, because we were just all over the place, which is fun. But do check out Second Street, and yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And I want to thank everyone for listening. Everyone have a great day, night, evening, wherever you are. Have a great day.
All right.